Hello and welcome to episode 32 of Retro Recall the PS1 Chronicles, a show where we play and rank every PlayStation game ever created. My name is Jimmy, and as always, I'm here with Mike.
Hello.
So we took a few weeks off to play this game. You know, we don't usually do that, but we felt with RPGs, you got to put in a good chunk of time. You can't just play a Persona for 2 hours and then be like, oh, 5 out of 10, you know?
If we played for 2 hours, we'd get maybe through a tutorial, and that's about it.
Yeah, like what, the first dungeon, maybe?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I haven't really done much. I haven't played any other games because I've been trying to put in as many hours as I could with this. But I did just finish a complete watch of all of the Indiana Jones movies.
Oh, wow. That's a big take.
I mean, there's 5.
I thought there was so much more than that.
No. It also wasn't like just the past few weeks. I just finished it yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I actually really like them. I mean, some of them are questionable in the beginning for sure. Overall, I'm really excited for that game coming out.
Oh, there's a new game coming out?
Yeah, it's the guys that make Wolfenstein. They're making an Indiana Jones game.
Oh, that's interesting.
Makes sense. I mean, he's always fighting Nazis, right?
Yeah, true. And this is a stupid question, but I've never seen Indiana Jones.
Oh.
Is Harrison Ford always Indiana Jones? Or is it a different guy at some point?
Apparently there's like a TV show where he's not in it, but every other one, including the one that just came out, it's all him.
Oh, nice. I didn't know if it was like the James Bond thing where like there's always a new actor for James Bond and they changed it up.
No. So the first 3, you know, the older ones, those are very much like standalone movies. Like they don't really go too crazy with like the continuing. It's mostly just like, here's him in this situation.
Right.
And then the 2 newer ones are like canonically taking place after that stuff. And then the one that just came out last year, which actually was not bad, it is the final one. And they said that it's done. So,
oh, okay.
Harrison Ford is 80. So,
I was going to say, you got to consider how old he is and stuff. So, there has to be an ending at some point.
But no, I liked them all. My favorite was the 3rd one, The Last Crusade. I wouldn't say they're, amazing movies or anything, but something just to put on, you know, while you're doing something else, while you're like, just, it's not a kind of movie that you want to pay full attention to or that you need to pay full attention to, you know? You can kind of just watch it in parts. It's not, you know, highbrow cinema.
I couldn't tell you why I just never watched it. I think it's just my parents never saw it or I never knew anyone who did watch it, so I just never had the urge to want to see it.
That's how it was for me. I mean, I obviously watched Star Wars a ton growing up, and I want to say my dad liked Indiana Jones. I've definitely seen parts of the movies, but I've never sat down myself and watched them all. So I figured might as well just give it a shot. And I liked them enough to keep going, so I finished them all. But yeah, I mean, it's cool. Like, I don't think that you like need to see them. You know what I mean?
But yeah, I agree. But I also think there's so many older movies that I just never have seen. And it's always brought up at work and stuff. And people are surprised that I haven't seen them. Like The Goonies. I don't think I've ever fully watched that movie. I've only seen bits and pieces.
I've definitely seen that movie.
Iconic older movies that I feel like everyone should see at some point just to see it. And I am very far behind on all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of similar, honestly. Like, if you want to talk to me about a video game, I can talk all day. But when it comes to movies, I try to just watch the newer ones that I'm interested in, but it really doesn't ever happen. And there's so many older like series. Like, I've never seen any Terminator movie. I've never seen like Predator, any of those. Like, you know what I mean? I've never like,
Yep.
For some reason, I just never watched them.
Yeah, I believe like Predator too. I remember parts, but I couldn't tell you the entire movie.
Well, another one that I did this with was like a couple months ago. I watched all the Alien movies. I mean, I'd seen all the newer ones like Prometheus onwards and like the newer stuff, but I had never seen the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. I'd only seen the original, which is still the best one, but I actually don't even think I've watched the 4th one yet. I've watched the first 3. So, but yeah, it's just, you know, it's nice to go back and watch different series. Just there's so many movies and half of them might be bad, but it's cool.
And you honestly just reminded me that Prometheus was an Aliens movie. I completely forgot that detail.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the movie forgets it too until like the end.
I feel like when I saw that movie in theaters, I almost fell asleep for how boring it was.
I need to watch it again because I haven't seen it since it came out, but I definitely remember feeling similar for sure.
It's just, from my memory, it was just a slow-paced movie. And I'm just like, are we done?
Well, there's a new Alien movie coming out, like, I want to say August. It looks really good. It's like actually scary looking. So that's cool.
Yeah. And I've been wanting to maybe play Alien Isolation. I've heard that's one of the top scary games out there.
I've played a good bit of it. I never beat it. It's definitely scary. I don't know. I didn't find it that fun to play.
Oh, okay.
I think if I went back now, I'd probably like it because this was like so long ago at this point.
Yeah.
I guess we should probably get into Persona, huh?
Oh, yeah. Movie talk is over. So we should get into the game.
Even before we get into it, like, what is your history with Persona? I mean, we both like this series.
Yeah. So I had to look up the dates of all this to get a good idea of when this all happened. But I never heard about Persona until the news of Persona 5 being released came out. And all the news outlets were talking about it of like, oh, Persona 5 is going to be a big, huge game. Had no clue what it was. But all the reviews I was also watching were talking about like, oh, you get to go to school and take tests and do this stuff. And like, who wants to play this game? Why is this a fun game that people are excited for? And then came about you talking to me about Persona 4 and how I should play it. And I'm like, but isn't that the school game? And I think you said yes, but just play the game and you'll love it. And from that point on, playing Persona 4, absolutely loved this series with only playing one game. So I want to go back, play Persona 3. I want to play Persona 5, get that full experience of all that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to play Persona for so long because I'd always seen it. And I'm like, this is totally right up my alley. I mean, it's an RPG where like, it's more of a life simulation game than an RPG in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Life simulation, and it kind of fuses with the RPG and the life simulation type thing.
Yeah, but I mean, like when you take away the whole visual novel and the whole like life simulation stuff, as we'll find out in a bit here, you don't really have much there.
Right.
Yeah, I played Persona 4 and I think I beat Persona 5 first.
Oh, okay.
Like I played Persona 5 right when it came out because it looked so interesting and like just the aesthetic of it and the music and everything. It's just perfect game. Like probably one of my favorite games I've played ever.
Yeah. I will say I listened to Persona 4 and 5 soundtracks religiously.
I still do.
Yeah. It's usually always on at work. If I just need to focus, I put that on. So it's just on and like it distracts me and I can just get to work.
Exactly. I just love both of them. I want to play Persona 3 because that remake came out. I'm assuming they're going to remake more of them too. So while they are a huge time commitment and I don't know when I will play another one, I consider myself, a huge fan of the series for sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there's also Persona 4 Golden, Persona 5 Royale, which is just bonus content on top of the main game.
I have Persona 5 Royal, and apparently it adds like another 30 hours to the game or something.
That's incredible.
I already put 80 hours into that game.
Yeah, I was going to say Persona 4 was 70 some hours that I put in. That's just one playthrough. That's not even New Game Plus. It's right on top of my desk here. I can see it, and I'm just like, one day I'll get another 80 hours to play the game again, but right now is not that time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when I'll play another one realistically, but one day I definitely will. Probably when Persona 6 comes out and I can't ignore it.
Oh yeah. That's why I want to go back and play 3 and then 4 again and then work my way back through the timeline, because when the newer one comes out, they just always look so much fun. And after experiencing it, I just want to now get more in-depth story, because I remember you saying in 4 that they reference stuff in 5 like that comes to fruition in the next game. So it's it's really cool that they continue that storyline kind of subtly through each game.
Mm-hmm. Let's just go ahead and hop right into Persona then. Revelations Persona was released on December 14th, 1996. It was developed and published by Atlas. And, this is just honestly a pretty straightforward turn-based RPG. I mean, there's like a lot of elements to it, but at its core, it doesn't have those other things like the later games have.
So I will say I'm very surprised getting through this that there's a lot of stuff they established in this first game that is still in use to the 5th game.
Dude, whenever I got to the music in the Velvet Room, I was like, it's still the same.
Yep. Obviously, they changed it up a little bit in the Velvet Room, but yeah, that when it hit, I'm like, holy hell, like from the game 1, they had this nailed down.
Yeah, I mean, it was missing that really cool intro that it has in every other version, but still.
Yeah. I don't want to get too far into this right away. So I think we should at least explain what the Persona stuff is to people who might not play the game or know what it is?
Yeah, I can start. So essentially, your characters each have a persona within them, which is like essentially like a demon that you control. It's like pretty much.
I was going to ask you if they're demons or not. Like, it's like a spirit that you have.
Yeah, I mean, you create personas from demons.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where my brain was at. But
mine too.
regardless, there's some sort of monster of some kind.
Yeah.
And yeah, each character can have multiple personas in this game, which was interesting, by the way, because the later ones, only the main character can have multiple persona.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, essentially, this is just a straight up RPG where you're using persona. And the first thing that surprised me with the gameplay was, certain times it's top down 2D.
Mm-hmm.
In the dungeons, it's first person 3D.
Yep.
And then in the overworld, it's full 3D map, but overhead with a little dot representing you.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
So whenever I played Persona 4 and you told me about it, I then started doing research about all of it. And I believe that, I looked at Persona 1 and saw how everything was laid out. In Persona 2, I believe that they take away from the first person in the dungeon thing and it becomes an isometric at that point. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like the first person stuff. It's not that I necessarily think it takes anything away from the game. Like, I don't think it makes the game worse. I just don't really care for it.
It reminds me of that old Windows screensaver, if you remember that with the maze.
Oh, I do.
So that's all I remember, or that's all I could think of as I was going through each dungeon.
Well, there was also a ton of like dungeon crawling games back in the day that were first person like that.
Yeah, that's true.
So it makes sense why it would be incorporated like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just kind of using that to get us started with the gameplay, just to explain, because there's so much to this.
There really is. The amount of systems threw me off at first because the later games don't have that many systems. I feel like they simplified it as they went on. But with this, you have a moon cycle in the top, and I never fully grasped what that meant.
From looking it up, apparently it can affect the monsters you encounter and like the way the monsters behave.
Oh.
But I literally just ignored it the whole time.
Oh, so did I. But would that mean in some situations you would just stand still until the moon cycle changed and then you start moving again?
I guess.
And then you just wait until it's like in the good time frame to start get into a battle?
Maybe. I mean, so the other thing is you talk to these monsters, right? And you can choose, instead of fighting them, talk to them and try and convince them to give you stuff. One of which being a spell card. And you can use the spell cards to create persona. So I'm thinking what they're kind of getting at is maybe if the moon cycle is something different, you can have an easier time talking to them.
Maybe. And that might actually explain a lot of my experience too.
I mean, before we even get into critiquing anything, like, I think the talking system is trash, but like,
it really is.
We're going to go through every single aspect of this fucking game. I figure you just wanted to lay the ground level for everything first.
Yeah. And another thing about the persona that you didn't mention too is that each persona has its own type of attacks. Like it's essentially your magic system.
Yeah, like elemental attacks.
Yeah. So your main character who you play as is a wind attack. You can verify this for Persona 5. Is that always the case that your main character always is wind?
I don't really remember because in the later games, you usually end up swapping out personas so fast.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you just get a collection and like I don't remember what your starting one is.
Okay. I'm pretty sure in 4 you start as a wind type as well. But that's just from my memory. But anyway, so you have like wind, fire, ice, holy, dark. There's a lot.
Yeah, there's the gravity one. I forget what that one's called.
Oh yeah, physical. And then you have just support personas.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had the one character with me the whole time solely just to be the healer.
Wait, what?
Well, Mary is pretty much the healer of the whole game, right?
Oh, who'd you say solely?
Solely. Like, she is solely there for that.
Oh, I thought that was like a character. I'm like, I never met this person. I don't know who you're talking about. Yeah. Mary is huge in this game for keeping your people alive.
Also, just really quick, this game features some questionable things, as you can see on the screen right now.
The dialogue system is, oh boy. You can tell this was from the 90s, I guess.
Yeah, it's just I don't like it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in this game that's just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming most of it is fixed in the PSP version because that one is like from the late 2000s. I would imagine anyway. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of cringing in this game. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just even from what your characters are saying, sometimes what the demons say, it's like a lot of like very sexual stuff, very
Yeah.
questionable things, and like borderline very racist stuff as well. Like,
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here that definitely does not hold up.
not at all. And I never got used to it. Every time it came up, I'm like, oh my God, why are we still doing this?
I know some of the things the demons would say, I just like had to stop for a minute and just like take a picture of it and send it to someone. Like, can you believe this shit?
Yeah, you sent me one photo and you're like, well, so it's not just me. The dialogue is questionable in this game, right? I'm like, oh yeah.
But anyway, I saw that on the screen in the capture we're watching, so I just wanted to bring that up really quick.
So the story in this game is minimal, as we pointed to in the intro. It kind of starts off as just they're playing this game and then they summon a ghost and then they all go unconscious. And that pretty much what starts this series of events and everything. And you talk to this masked guy who gives you your persona.
Yeah, and that guy is the only time there's like voice acting is when you talk to him.
Yeah. Aside from like the screaming when you summon a persona.
Yeah, you mean when they say persona?
Yeah. Not to go too off track, but my favorite one, I think it was the main character, Us. And whenever he goes to do his persona, he just screams. It's just like, ah.
Yeah, every time they said persona, I'm like, it's persona, dummy. But I genuinely thought the story was pretty good. I mean, I feel like in this episode, we're going to compare this to the only other RPG we've played so far a bit.
Saga.
Looking at Saga, like, this story is amazing compared to that.
Yes.
But I genuinely like the story here. I think it was enough to make me keep playing until I had finally had enough of it. I think that if I wasn't playing this for this show, I probably would have turned on some cheats and just like blasted through it.
Okay.
We'll get into it later, but like the reasons why I stopped playing were reasons that could be fixed with cheats. So I'm like, I could just get through it to see the story and to like just have fun with it and not endlessly grind away at this game.
Yeah, and we'll get into that later. I feel like I kind of made it harder on myself, or I played it wrong from the beginning, which screwed me later on. But we'll get into that when that time comes. But the story is intriguing enough where you have this mysterious girl in black, and everyone keeps talking about the girl in black, and she shows up a few times, but you're trying to like figure out who she is and how she's involved with stuff. So I mean, the story is there, but it's not constant throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, you're essentially having a story moment, exploring the town, next story moment, dungeon, story moment. It's not like a super frequent thing that happens. It's more so like there's little bits of text here and there to move you along, but it's not super involved.
Mm-hmm. I would say maybe 90% of your time you're just through a dungeon and that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the meat of this game is the combat.
Yeah.
So we will be talking about that plenty. Yeah. I mean, are there any other systems that we haven't really talked about yet before we start diving deep in here? I mean, we haven't talked about the combat yet, but that's going to be a whole thing.
Yeah.
There's also the casino in the game. I don't know if you messed with that at all.
I did. Yeah.
I didn't do any of it, but when I found it, I was like, that's kind of cool.
I played 2 different games and lost some money, but the fact that they have a casino where you can actually gain money too if you play right, pretty nice system, I think. Yeah, so we have the negotiating, we have the fighting, and I think the only other thing is the personas like fusion.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really mess with it too much. I mostly just used the personas that I came with just because, well, I guess we'll just get into this. I mean, the conversation stuff is just so whatever. It's so hard to get the spell cards from them. And half the time when I would do it, it would be like, you're not a high enough level anyway, so you can't have it.
That was my biggest complaint so yeah, I said we were going to talk about this later. I guess we'll talk about it now. I feel like I screwed myself early on because I wasn't getting soul cards from the beginning because I didn't understand that system completely. And so it wasn't until later on when I'm in the higher level stuff where I need new personas and I just didn't have them because I couldn't get the soul cards in time. So the way the dialogue system works is you can choose to communicate with a demon, and when you do that, it tells you what their mood is. I guess it's like
Yeah, there's like different little tags for them, and that is supposed to inform you like what to say.
yes,
But I never felt any correlation to any of it.
I started to pick up on it towards the end for some of them, but yeah, it's like stupid, weak, happy, grumpy, snobby,
Strong.
strong.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not just one of them. There's like, I ran into one that was like 4 different things.
Usually it's like at least 2, I would say. But yeah, so once you do that, you're supposed to like talk to them, and each one of your characters can talk to them, and there's different options for each one. So essentially how I would do this is I would just try whatever and see which bar it made go up. And then, eventually they'd either get too angry and I'd have to fight them, or most of the time I knew what would cause fear and I would use that to just get out of the battle because I'm just sick of these fucking battles.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it's something, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So going off of what you were saying, as you're talking to them, there's a bar up in the upper left-hand corner that has 4 different colors. You have red for angry, green for joy, blue for fear, and yellow for intrigued, I think is the yellow.
Interest, I think.
Interest, there it is, yeah. So each one does different things. If you get them angry enough, then they either attack you or they try to intimidate you. You essentially lose a turn if you failing, they get angry. If you scare them, they run away, or they get so scared that they can't move. So you just get a bunch of free hits in on them until they get unscared. Joy, they give you something and they're happy, and they sometimes don't want to fight you. They fight for you and they'll attack the other people on the field.
I didn't know that.
I had that happen to me once. I made like these little fairy girls happy and they started attacking each other out of it.
I thought it just meant they wouldn't attack you, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then the last one is interest. And if you get that up, then you can ask for their spell card. And then even that's a crapshoot on if you get the spell card or not.
Yeah, before we go too far into this, I want to say I did the exact same thing that you did, where I didn't get any spell cards for a very long time.
Which I'm surprised about. I thought we were going to go into this and you were going to say, oh, I had about 50 persona that I could choose from. And I was like having so much fun.
I made 3 persona my entire game.
I made 3 as well, my entire game.
First of all, okay, when is the first time you could find the Velvet Room? Because I didn't find it for a while.
Give me 1 second on that. I have it in my notes because I was very confused at how late in the game it is when I found it.
Well, while you figure that out, I will say when I started creating them was later in the game, you go to the like messed up version of the town. Like you go to the different dimension and then the other side of the town is even more messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And over there is the black market, which is like the version of the mall. And there is a Velvet Room you can go to whenever you want.
Right. So the first official Velvet Room that I found that I can go into was the Seebeck dungeon.
Okay, that's where it was for me too. I remember it being in a dungeon and I was like, why is this here?
Yep. But they also had the room in the mall, the normal mall.
I kind of figured that would happen, but I didn't explore the mall first.
Yeah. So it's right across from the casino and it just says Velvet Room above the door. But you can't go in there until you find it the first time, I believe.
That makes sense. Yeah, I didn't even realize it until after I found it the first time.
To put into perspective, the Seebeck dungeon that we're talking about, at least is like, 5 hours in? 6 hours?
At least. I mean, you could beeline it there, I'm sure. But if you're playing like a normal person, it's going to take you a while.
Mm-hmm. So it felt very late into the game because I feel like in Persona 4, it's almost immediately after the tutorial that you get introduced to the Velvet Room.
I was certain that after I talked to that guy, like when he comes up on the screen and talks to you, that we were going right to the Velvet Room.
Wait, what guy?
The cutscene guy. I forget his name.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause that's how it works in the later games. You talk to somebody and then they're like, you're in the Velvet Room now.
Mm-hmm. It was almost like I kind of forgot, or I was starting to think maybe it was a teaser to see it in the mall. They're like, oh, Velvet Room, that's for like the next game or something that is coming.
Yeah.
So I wasn't expecting to see it at all because of how late into this game it was.
Another point I want to bring up while we're talking about all this stuff is like, if we didn't have prior Persona knowledge, I think this would have been really fucking hard to figure out.
I agree 100%. Even having a little bit of Persona knowledge, the systems on this are close in some aspects, but there's just so much more that it was so hard to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the very bare minimum of what those systems are. Obviously, this is where they were created, so it makes sense. But the game doesn't explain anything to you. I mean, I didn't look at the manual at all. I don't know if you did.
Yeah, so that's actually how I learned about how to get the soul cards. It wasn't until about maybe 9 hours into the game I decided to look through the manual because I thought, having played before, it would be easy to pick up and understand all the systems.
I mean, I eventually picked up on it, obviously, but I just never felt like the game explained anything. And my prior knowledge is what it led me to figuring these things out on my own. But for someone that had never played a Persona game, you would have no idea what's going on here.
No, not at all. It's weird because I feel like in 4, and we'll keep referring to 4 and 5 because that's what we know the best, that they do such a good job of explaining the games, but yet it's the latest in this series where you shouldn't have to explain all this stuff, but it's so well constructed. So any new player coming in playing that game first, like we did, you understand everything perfectly.
Persona 5, the quality of life features, everything about it just makes it such a breeze to play. Like, you could figure that game out no problem because, to be fair, in both of those games, the tutorial alone is like 8 hours. But
Yeah.
regardless, like, it's still, it teaches you everything.
I always make the joke that Persona 4, the first 4 to 5 hours is pressing X simulator because you're just getting through the story to build up that you're playing to.
And that's what I learned when we were playing this game, is that's what I like about Persona, apparently. I love the story. I love the life sim stuff. I love the planning my day and talking to people. That's the stuff I like, not the combat.
So I was thinking about this a lot while playing the game. And here's the way I kind of figured it out. This game has the same systems and everything, or it's at least the same format as the later games, but it's switched. So Persona 3 to 5, as we say, is a story and life simulation game at the forefront. And you use these dungeon crawling moments, the RPG moments, in between the story to get the story moving along. This game is the exact opposite, where the dungeon crawling RPG is the forefront, and the story is what comes up periodically just to keep things moving. So it's like they just switched those two things around and it made the game so much better.
Yeah, it has me very interested because Persona 2 is obviously on the PS1 as well. So I'm very interested to see kind of if it's more like this or if it's like leaning the other way. Because I know Persona 3 is when the modern Persona style started. Is 2 going to be like somewhere in between, or is it just going to be another one of these?
I didn't think about that. That'd be really cool if it's in between.
But yeah, so just to start even, I mean, how many hours did you play?
Between like 15 and a half to almost 16 hours, somewhere in between there. How about you?
I would say I'm probably right around the same, actually. I mean, it's hard to tell because I wasn't exactly keeping track. So fair warning, most of the capture you're going to see is probably Mike's because once we realized you weren't going to get as far as I did, I started capturing from there on.
Yeah, that in itself says a lot that we played about the same time and I made it nowhere close to where you made it. I just finished up in the subway where you had to fight the amphibian reptile guy. Not reptile, but the amphibian man.
Yeah.
Finally beat him, and then I was done. I gave up at that point. And that was about the 15-hour mark at that point.
So I did 3 more dungeons after that.
Which is insane to me that you managed to get that much in.
I even spent the first time you go into the Seaback place. Seaback. How do you say that?
I've been saying Seaback. I don't really know what this actually is. I guess
they don't actually say it, so how would you know? But when I got there, there's enemies that can just destroy you.
Yep. In one hit.
So I grinded for about an hour, and that made no difference at all. So I just pushed through it. So a couple things that kind of saved me were once you get through where you stopped, you get to the other version of the other side of the town that's like all messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to the black market, which is the different version of the mall, which essentially is the exact same thing. But if you go to the pharmacy there, you can buy herbs for $10.
Oh.
So I bought 100.
That's very nice.
The combination of that and using Mary's cure spell just helped me force my way through it.
Yeah. So I went through like Seabeck. I was doing that dungeon. I was maybe like 3 hours in. I'm making progress. I'm doing so well. And then what were the enemies? It was the angel girls who had the security guards in front of them. And they one-tapped my entire team, and I lost 3 hours of progress. So then I had to reload my game, start again. And the second time through, I missed a ton of items because I wasn't exploring as much anymore because I was just frustrated that I had lost all that time. And I realized going through the second time that the save room, the second save room in Seebeck was literally like 3 turns away in the hallway from where I died.
Second save room.
There's like 2. There's one in the very beginning of the dungeon, and then you get like further into the dungeon, and there's like a second save room in there.
I never found the second save room.
Oh, weird.
So pretty much how I beat it, and when you told me you were struggling with it, what I was going to tell you is, so I went all the way to the top, and then you have to go back down and kind of figure out your way back up again, up through different stairs, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how, but I just went down a few, and I found this stairway that takes you right to where you have to go.
Oh, wow. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's like this weird little room. I mean, obviously we're not going to show this because I don't have footage of it, but it's like a square room, and you just go all the way up and you get up there, and that's where the boss is.
Oh, yeah. That's how you have to find the guy in the first place. Yeah.
But like, I found it so fast.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I wonder how you got there.
Yeah, I mean, I was messing around on the top floor for a while because I was like, maybe there's like a switch or something you have to pull to get over there, or like, and then I'm like, no, you have to go back down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we got pretty deep into this already, like we always do. So, number one problem with the game: too many random encounters.
Too many random encounters to enemies you can't see at all. If you like Pokemon, you might like this game because of the random encounters, but
This is worse than Pokemon.
I'm 100%. Even I bought a Game Boy SP, and I bought the original Pokemon games because I wanted to just play them and like, oh, nostalgia. I didn't realize how annoying the random encounters were in Pokemon, and I just never played again because it just frustrated me so much. Going into this game, getting into a fight, taking 3 more steps forward and getting into another fight I was just screaming and swearing at the game the entire time.
When you told me you were taking your time and exploring, I was just thinking, how in the hell are you doing that?
So actually, I was doing the exploring prior to enemies being outside.
Yeah, I probably should have did that.
But I mean, you don't realize that that's going to happen because in the one thing they also carry over, like they start in this game and they carry over for the rest of the games, is the fog. The fog is always the big theme in these games. Even in the later games, when the fog is out, you can run around outside and you're fine. It's not until you actually get to the dungeons where the enemies are.
Also, keep in mind that like none of the other games are like this where the enemies are everywhere. So I think maybe they structured the story around that so that they didn't have this problem anymore.
True. Yeah. And actually, it's funny that you bring up how frequent the random encounters are, because when it came to North America and was the PS1 version over here, they actually decreased the amount of random encounters for us. So could you imagine even more than what we experienced?
I can't even imagine that. All right, let's get into the combat now, because I think we should this is the last thing we have to talk about, and then we can kind of go off on all the points we want to go off on, you know?
Okay, yeah.
I'd also like to kind of go through the game sequentially and like just talk about every part as we go.
Mm-hmm.
Number one problem for me with the combat is it's just so slow.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was my biggest complaint too.
So literally, I would queue up everything and then just look at my phone.
Mm-hmm. I was watching videos at the same time.
Apparently, in the remake of this, or remaster, whatever you want to call it, there is a fast forward button.
Oh, I was pushing buttons hoping that something did that.
If every one of your characters is doing a persona attack, you're going to be sitting there for like a solid few minutes.
Not even your characters. If the demons start doing persona or like magic attacks, there's some of them that just go for so long because they have to do their little taunt with the sound, and then the image has to come up, and then the attack happens, and then the effect of the attack happens, and then it's finally like the next person's turns. So when you have some of these characters that have those long attacks, and there's 3 of them, and they're all doing it, you're just like, I'm not going to get to play for a while.
It got to the point where like I would forget what attacks work on the enemies because I wasn't paying attention when they were happening because they just take so fucking long.
Yep. when I started getting distracted with YouTube and watching that in the meantime, I was like, oh, I didn't even pay attention to if anything even hurt them or if anything healed them. Like, I gained zero knowledge on this fight and I don't know what to do.
So yeah, the combat though is pretty much unchanged from later Persona. I mean, it's all about essentially figuring out what this enemy is weak to and what it is strong against.
Yep.
And then just repeating that. I would start every battle by just using every Persona attack that I had for each character to just see what worked and what didn't.
And that's what we still do to this day when playing Persona. Because each one of your characters has a different element, eventually your Persona gets high enough level where an attack is like, for your main character, you have a wind attack, but then you have a wind all attack. So that attacks every enemy. So I do all of those. I do a wind all, I do a gravity all, and just make sure I cover the whole field and gain some knowledge off of the characters based off of that, and then go from there.
Yeah, and you can also click the analyze thing, and it will show you what it is weak to if you already know this.
Yes. But if it's your first time coming up to a demon, it's all question marks because you haven't encountered this guy before.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I didn't test was if you actually have to find the weakness or if you can just kill them and it'll tell you. I don't know.
I believe it's if you kill them, it gives you all the information.
Okay, so you don't actually have to figure out the weakness. It'll tell you if you at least kill them.
Yeah, because there's some demons where it's like, oh, this one's weak to fire, but I had 0 fire Persona people, so I never got to use that on them.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But the downside to that is if you get their spell card, then you didn't fight them, therefore you know nothing about them. So it's still question marks the second time you meet them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or if you just like use the conversation to get them out of there in some way, it doesn't count either.
Yeah, so it's definitely a balance of, do you fight them to get the knowledge that you need to beat them later on, or do you talk to them to get their spell card for your benefit?
Yeah, and other than the Persona attacks, you also have guns.
The guns threw me off so much.
There's guns in Persona 5 as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And you have a weapon of some kind. And you can go to shops and you can upgrade all this stuff. And you can upgrade, every character has a full set of gear as well. You can upgrade all that. We will talk about that at some point. But yeah, I mean, those are all different types as well. So like enemies could be weak to gun or weak to physical, whatever, you know, it's literally all the same. I mean, you a lot of the time can count on if you have a strong physical attack with a weapon, you can always count on that, or like a strong gun, you can count on that. So like for Nate, I had a really good gun with good bullets. So I just used that for him and I never used his Persona ever.
Oh, okay.
And for Mark, I got him a really good axe. So I would just use that.
Yeah, looking at the gameplay for what the characters are that you have, it looks like I had the same setup as you.
Yeah, and also the form that your characters are set in is very important as well, like the way they're organized.
Ah, yeah.
One huge annoyance for me is if an enemy attacks you from behind, it reverses your entire form and your bad character's in the front now.
Oh, is that why that happened? I could not figure that out.
And what I would do is after that battle, I would forget that happened. And I would go into the next battle and my form would still be messed up.
Yep. It took me so long of a time to realize I had to put Mary in the back.
Yeah. I mean, if she's not in the back, she's like pretty much useless.
Yep. She's just there for curing. That's about it.
Yeah. I mean, I used her for that and then for the like freezer attack.
Yeah. I was kind of mad at myself for realizing that so late in the game. I feel like probably the rest of the dungeons I was complaining about would have been easier if I had the correct people in the correct places.
I experimented with it a lot until I figured it out because it actually is very important. Like you can't just really ignore it.
Yeah. I would just usually have them lined up in the front, like a little zigzag in the front, because I wanted, like, oh, they need to be in the battle. They need to be up there. And then I started realizing, like, why is Mary's attacks always so long range? And then it clicked in my head way too late. Oh, that's why.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot to the combat with all this explaining and all these things going on, but it's at its core, you kind of just figure out what works and just repeat it until they die.
Yep. Same with the conversations. Like you find one thing that gets their interest up and you just spam that one thing until you get where you need to be.
Very rarely did that not work for me.
The only time I found it not working is, this is another thing I hated about the conversations, was you start getting them in the path of interest and you're like, cool, I'm going to get their spell card. But then like, oh, this is great. Give me something. And then they always wanted a magic stone. And I'm like, I only have like so many of these. I can't be giving these away to every single demon that asks for one. And so you say no, and then they get mad at you, and then that raises that bar up.
I thought it was funny. There was a lot of enemies that would be like, I want a gift. I want something that makes the world go round. Give me $30.
Yeah. I had like some like $9 ones and stuff. It's like, all right, yeah, this is nothing.
Yeah, you get a lot of money from each battle. Like you get at least like 20 or $30. So like, I was like, I'll get that back in another battle. So I don't care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also get experience and you level up in this game as well. But it's very strange because your characters and your persona level are separate.
That's actually a big thing too. That if you fuse persona together, sometimes you can't even use them because you're not high enough level to have them in your like rotation.
Yeah, I mean, you can only get persona experience points if you use a persona in the battle. And even the regular stats that go up as you're playing, I didn't really feel like they mattered that much.
No. I think whenever I had to update or upgrade my guy, I think I put it into technicality or technical.
So I looked up what each one does. So strength is obviously just like your physical attacks. Vitality is just the defense. And like, I'm assuming your health as well. Technology or whatever is, the magic, and it's how accurate you are. Agility, probably the most important stat of them all because it determines how fast you come up in battle. And then luck, I guess, just kind of affects all the stats in minor ways from what I could find.
Yeah. And I found that the tech one like boosted 3 different things at once. So I'd always just put mine into tech.
I just tried to make sure I had mostly an even spread.
Okay.
Because it just didn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, that's the combat. It's just literally like Pokemon, essentially. Like, what's super effective?
Yeah, that's the greatest way to put it. It sounds like there's a lot from everything we're saying, but at the core of it, it's really not that much.
I think this is going to be our longest episode ever, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, this is like we're just now we're still getting into this game and we're an hour in.
Well, that we recorded something else, but still very long.
Yeah. And some demons, they just don't take magic at all. Like you literally just use your sword or gun, and that's what is the thing that kills them. So that's nice that sometimes there's times where you have the balance of like, do I do all persona attacks on this or do I split it up between persona attacks and physical attacks just to figure out what they're weak to? So there's a lot of planning going into these fights, but it's really not an intense amount of planning, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have much more to say about it. It's kind of just trying everything. Once you figure it out, you just spam it. And then when you see that enemy again, you're like, all right, this is what I do. It's not a bad combat system, and we see later how it works. I just think that a lot of the stuff here is obtuse and it's very hard to figure out and kind of makes it a lot more complicated than it needs to be for something that is not complicated.
I fully agree. One other thing is that if you try to communicate with a demon that you already have their spell card, they leave automatically. I tried because I thought maybe I could get 2 out of them because now I know how to get your spell card.
Now, if you use their spell card to create one and you don't technically have one in your inventory, I'm assuming then it would work again, right?
Yeah. If you got rid of it and then went back, you can get another one.
I mean, that makes sense. You can't just like stockpile a bunch of one.
No, I get it completely. I just think the way that you can get your spell cards later on in the other games is so much nicer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you essentially just get that persona way easier.
And that doesn't mean the game becomes easier because of that. Like the games are still tough in areas.
I don't even know how I would describe this game as far as difficulty goes. It's mostly just frustrating. I wouldn't call it super hard. Like you just have to grind.
Yeah, but even you said you did do that and it didn't work at all.
I'm assuming I would have had to have grinded for way longer.
Probably. And that's where I gave up. That's where I was feeling like if I want to actually proceed, I probably need to spend a couple more hours just going around getting random fights to boost my people before I can go forward. Because I feel like I was right on that gray area of just not being strong enough to take on these people.
That's how I felt mostly like the whole time. And then where I stopped today, I got my whole party wiped out for the first time in a very long time. And I was like, so these enemies have this attack called death.
Okay.
It's in later Persona games. It has a % chance to just kill you on the spot.
Oh, wow.
And they also had attacks, and you can use attacks like this too. Like the Holy does this, where you do the damage, but then at the end of every turn, it does more damage.
Yes.
So this group of enemies was spamming that and the death thing. So if they weren't killing me on the spot, they were just taking away 40 HP at the end of every turn.
Yep.
When I died, I was like, there's just no way I can beat where I'm at right now without grinding hours.
Yep. I had that same exact experience with when you're in the school, like alternate universe place.
Yeah, like the different dimension.
Yeah, the toilets with arms in them. They were like just destroying me because they would do like, I think it was like called curse or something like that. And it would insta kill 3 people automatically.
Even just that one attack that would, I forget what it was called, and it would bring all of your HP to 1.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what they did. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can just go from you're completely full HP and fine to dead in 10 seconds.
Yeah. And that's where with the amphibian guy, I just gave up trying to revive people because I had like resuscitation items.
Yeah, me too. But I only had a few.
Mm-hmm. So I gave up and I'm just like, I'm just fighting this out. And if I die this time, because I already died to this guy like 3 other times, this is my final attempt. And it was like dwindling down. Then it was just, I believe, Mary and me. And then I went out and it was literally just Mary. So I'm just using a 9mm handgun, taking like 2 health off of him. And it finally beat him. And I was like, oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I beat that guy on my first try.
I don't know what was going on. There were encounters I just could not win. Like with that guy specifically, he kept using a magic thing to bring down my strength. So my strength, like every hit I was doing, no matter what move, no matter what attack, it was only like 5 damage on him.
In a couple scenarios, I used Nate has that magic up spell, and I would just spam that over and over again. So that way all my persona attacks would do way more.
Yeah. But then in that case, when he's constantly doing and you're constantly doing that, you're just dead even. No one's moving anywhere. And it's like, I spend maybe another 2-3 hours on this and I'm tired. And then I just get completely wiped. So I got to do it all over again the next day. And it's just so demotivating for that to happen.
Honestly, the most discouraging thing for me was just the exploring the dungeons in themselves. The fact that they're literal mazes. Like,
yep.
What you picture as a maze that you would do with a fucking pen and pencil. Like, that's what this is, with dead ends for no reason. Like, and something that really, truly frustrated me, and it was the worst in the last couple areas I did because the mazes were just so much. So as you go through it, you can check the map, and it shows you places that you've been.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't physically walk into the actual dead end, it doesn't appear on the map.
Yep.
So it can be easy to like get lost and think, okay, here's a few places I haven't gone. I can try there. So you're trying to figure out how to navigate this annoying ass maze while having these constant random encounters. And it's just not fun.
No. And it's really just like I found that when it came to the dungeon portion, it kind of goes back to what we talked about with Star Wars, of how we put the overlay on for the map and you mainly just looked at the overlay and didn't actually pay attention to the graphics. That's how I was with these dungeons. I was staring in the top right corner the entire time, not even paying attention to what was going on.
Oh, absolutely. You have to. I mean, there's no other way to play.
Which is frustrating for like the factory before you get into Seabeck because there's actual switches you need to hit on the wall. So if you're only staring at that top right, you miss those switches that you need to hit.
That was the only time that happened to me in the whole game, by the way.
Yeah.
There were no other parts of switches.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good at least.
Is it? Why is it only there? By doing that, it makes me think now I should look for switches, and there never was another one again.
Maybe just to switch it up before going into the next dungeon? I don't know.
It's just so early in the game to like introduce that and then never do it again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And with these random encounters too, you probably will agree that this was so annoying when an enemy can sneak up behind you. How can you sneak up behind me if I can't even see you and this is all random?
Yeah, I mean, I already spoke on how frustrating that was earlier, but I just, I don't know. There's just so much with this game that's frustrating. And here's another one for you. Did you buy stuff and upgrade your characters and like buy new gear and guns and stuff?
A few times, or maybe like once with guns, but I know I went and bought some herbs and stuff too. Yeah.
So with the gear specifically, there's no way to be able to tell what characters can use it and who cannot.
Yep.
So after I fucked that up the first time because I bought all the best stuff and only Mary could use it. I know we don't do this, but I had to do it. I hit a save state. And then what I did was I would just buy something, see if it worked. If it works, I kept it. If it didn't, I loaded the save state because I'm just not going to sit here and do this. I'm not.
It was very odd how they just didn't have every character be compatible with every weapon or armor. Like there's times when you get like special shoes or boots that not every person can use. It's like, why is this the case?
I would be fine with it if it just said at the bottom, maybe a selection of all the characters' names and the ones that are highlighted can use it.
Yeah, exactly. Is
anything at all.
It's like with the Persona screen, how you have those different check marks and like X's. So it's like, okay, this combination can work. And it's giving me a nice grid to tell me that. I agree too. And it's the same problem we've complained about game and game again, where I go and look at a gun and it's like, oh, your attack is what, 40 or something? I'm like, okay, but what is my current weapons? So then I had to back out, look at all my weapons, see what they all are, and then go back into it now that I knew what I should be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, this is stuff that's just so easily fixed. And like, I get it's an early game, 1996, you know what I mean? Probably earlier in Japan. I forget how much earlier, but at the same time, it's just really hard to go back to this knowing what this series is.
Yeah, how much they fixed.
Like literally everything is fixed. Every single thing we've complained about this whole time is fixed.
Well, I mean, what's nice too is when you're trying to change weapons, like within your person, they at least tell you what goes up and what goes down in terms of stats.
Yeah, they do.
For each weapon. So that's at least nice.
That's fair. But yeah, I mean, when I got burned the first time and I didn't have a save that was like too soon before it, I'm like, all right, goodbye to all my money.
Yep. And I said that I made 3 Persona. One of those was during the Seaback dungeon. I made it and I continued on. That's whenever I was about 2 hours in, lost all my progress. Later on, after I beat the Seaback one, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to check out that Persona I made. It wasn't there anymore, and I could not figure out why. Turns out it was I saved before I got the Persona, and then I never got it again.
It's also very frustrating that you can't just move around the Persona at all unless you're in the Velvet Room. So, for example, if you make a Persona, if you don't equip it while you're in the Velvet Room, you can't use it, period.
Right.
I didn't know that the first time, so I left, and then I'm in a battle. I'm like, oh, cool, I'm going to switch Personas. It wasn't there. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought I would go into the regular menu and just like put it under the character I want, but instead you have to do it there.
And it's very interesting how every single character can have multiple, because like we said, it's usually just the main character. So the amount of like different customization you can do for everyone is intense.
If you really wanted to, you could go around and get a spell card for everything, and you can go create a bunch, figure out what you want, create a good loadout for each character. But I don't know. For me, with the random encounters and the way the game works, it just felt like a chore to do anything. Just moving from one building to another, it's just frustrating. So
it really is.
After a certain point, I was literally just doing what I had to do. And I know that's probably why I couldn't continue, because I didn't put in the work. But like, it's just so fucking frustrating. And there's nothing you can do about it.
So I told you this early on before we even did this recording, that in the very beginning when you're outside, how do you feel about the 3D graphics outside?
I think overall these graphics are pretty okay to bad.
Yeah. The dungeons don't look good for the most part. The outside, I think, is very minimalistic, but there's enough detail with all the buildings and stuff that it actually kind of works for what they're trying to do.
I honestly don't understand why they didn't just have you in first person outside, like a dungeon.
Maybe just too much. Oh, yeah. Why not just get rid of the 3D buildings and do that? That's a good point.
I mean, it's fine. It's just so like laggy, if that's the right word, just like slow.
Yeah.
Like it feels like something is wrong with it.
So whenever I started playing, I didn't realize that L2 was the quick key for map. So if I was in a dungeon, I'd go to settings, I'd go to the map function and then look at it that way. And for how often you're looking at the map, I was wasting so much time doing this.
Yeah, you told me, I remember you texted me like, is there a better way to look at the map? And I was like, what do you mean? It's pretty easy.
Well, and I had that because when you first go to the hospital, I went outside and I'm like, all right, well, the map in the top right corner is not giving me much information. So I'm just going to go, I guess. And I found the hospital just by walking around the city until I found it, because I didn't realize that there was an overview map that you could look at.
You said that's before the random encounters start, though, right?
Yes.
That's not that bad, all things considered. Could you imagine if you had to do that with the random encounters, though?
But so after the hospital, that's when the random encounters start. And you got to go to the shrine after the hospital. And I didn't know where the shrine was. So now I'm running up and down the streets trying to find the shrine with no map available to look at. So I was running into so many encounters, just trying to find my way back. And then after that, it's like, oh, now we got to get to the school. I'm like, I don't even know where the school's located from here. So needless to say, like on my second or third time playing, I just randomly hit the L2 button. And when I saw that map, I was just shocked that it just gives you all the information.
Yeah. I mean, if I was in your shoes, I would have been pretty angry.
I was so mad. I wasted so much time trying to find these buildings.
So what did you think about all the characters, though? Like all the other characters that are with you? Because, that's the main draw of these games a lot of the time is the characters around you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, I do like how when you meet a new character, it kind of gives you a brief description of that character right off the bat.
Yeah.
I think that's a nice touch. I want to say they just feel a little flat. Like there's really not much personality between them. It's just like random bickering for no reason, or like, I don't know. It's just, they all feel like they're just slightly different from one another, but they're not actually different people.
The only character that I felt like was an actual character and not just like an archetype was probably Mary.
I could see that.
Just because it seemed like she had something going on there, like some sort of like development.
Yeah, that's true.
The rest of them, they're all just like, I hate you, you suck, fuck you. And then it's that then you move on. You know what I mean?
Yep. You just have the nerdy guy who has a rich family. I guess like the punk bully guy who that's his whole personality is just being a punk bully, and it's just very one-dimensional.
I did read, by the way, very early on, when you find Brad, the bully guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, do you want me to come with you? If you say no, you get that other girl from the beginning instead.
I was literally just about to bring this up because I'm like, what happened to her? You see her in the beginning, she's part of your group, and then she just disappears.
Yeah, and whenever we were doing the fights with her in the party, she was really good too. I was kind of bummed. Brad kind of sucks.
I know. And do you never see her again?
No.
Weird.
I think I might have saw her one time.
So in the beginning, whenever you're at the school and they say, oh, I think her name's Yuki. Yuki went into the school to get supplies. I'm like, cool. So I need to go find her and talk to her. I thought that's what they meant by that.
I did the same exact thing.
I went to every room in the school, every little corner, trying to find her, to talk to her. And she's just gone out of the game.
I ran into her somewhere else after that. I just forget where.
Okay. I only remembered because it was right before the whole holy mirror thing. I went and talked to the nerdy guy, Nate is his name. Because at the very beginning, he's like, oh, I've heard of that. Where could it be? So I'm like, okay, he's the one who knows the information. So I'm going to talk to him. And I happened to talk to him. He's like, I wonder how Yuki's doing. I'm like, I completely forgot she even existed in this game.
There's also dialogue choices. I don't know if you ran into any of those at all.
I got so annoyed with those. You're talking about with the contact?
No, like in the story.
Oh. Do you have any examples? Because I can't think of any off the top of my head.
So the end of the black market dungeon, there's some stuff that you talk to the queen of that, or you can choose what to say. Apparently this scene right here, it's at the end of the Lost Forest. I looked it up because I'm not going to say the wrong things. Apparently, if you don't say these exact things that I picked here, you can't get the good ending of the game.
Oh, wow. But they still do that to this day.
Yeah, I know.
There's things that if you don't do it exactly right, you get a bad ending. So I wouldn't put them past them to do it from the very first game too.
Yeah, with these ones though, they are seemingly obvious, I guess, now that I know them. But at the same time, just kind of 3 or 4 random responses, and if you don't pick the right ones, then you're fucked for the whole rest of the game. I don't know. I don't like that.
Nope. It's just now I got to put in 20 plus hours more to get back to this point to try again and see if I can get it right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also the kind of scumbag that would look up all the answers to every question in Persona 4 and 5 when they ask you in school, because I'm not going to miss out on the stat ups.
Yeah. The only time I ran into the dialogue stuff was during the contacts with the demons. But I also wasn't paying attention to what anyone was saying. So when it came up as yes or no, I'm like, I don't know what the question was, so I don't know which one to pick.
Yeah. You'll see right here, it's kind of just seemingly whatever responses. And I don't know. I don't know what I would have picked if I didn't look it up, but I wasn't going to not look it up. I know that.
And it's crazy too, even in later games when they do this, is like you don't realize how crucial this moment is. You just think you're picking things. So if you were like us and you just weren't reading or really paying attention to everything and you're just choosing random stuff, you could just screw over your entire gameplay because of it.
Well, especially all the other ones up until now in the game were just kind of like, you can say something different, but in the end, the same thing sort of happens.
Oh, okay.
But there was another moment after the black market when you're fighting the boss. And so essentially she hates Mary and she's like, I bet you like my stuff more than Mary's, right? And if you say yes, you also get the bad ending of the game.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is all from like the walkthrough I was kind of looking at, but
do you know what the different endings are? Like, what is the bad ending versus the good ending?
I didn't really look into that because I didn't know how far of this game I was going to play.
True.
I mean, dude, think about Persona 4, where like at the end, there's the whole extra dungeon and whole final boss that you would just completely miss if you didn't do everything exactly right.
Yeah, well, even with that, there's even more that you have to do to get to that bonus dungeon. That game is, I don't want to spoil it for if you ever want to play Persona 4, but you think the game's over, but you probably just made the wrong choice and there's even more to do. And when you think you're done with that, there's still even more to do. It never ends.
Ridiculous. I also was pretty disappointed with the music overall as well. The high bar and everything else. I mean, there's definitely some good songs in here, but for the most part, it's just kind of like whatever to me.
It has that Persona feel, kinda. You can see where they were going with a lot of it, which makes it interesting that they nailed the Velvet Room song on the first go.
I mean, there's definitely good songs. Like, there's definitely good songs. I'm not saying it's all bad, but it's just not even in the same room as Persona 4 and 5,
Oh, not at all. And I've actually went back and I've listened to the OSTs for all the Persona games. I'll mix it up and go to different ones. So I've played listened to the Persona 1 OST a lot. But when I got into the game, I'm like, this is nothing that from what I remember that I listened to. And I'm like, well, maybe that music's coming later, but that music never came. So I had to dig into it. I was actually listening to the PSP version of this Persona game, which has completely different music and is entirely to that standard that we're used to in Persona. Interesting how this one didn't have that same level as it did on the remakes.
Yeah, I mean, they had to learn what Persona was first, I guess, because the remake was after Persona 3 and 4 were already out.
I didn't realize it was that late. That makes so much more sense.
So they knew the vibe for sure. And they just kind of probably went to match that.
I would say overall, this game sets up everything that we love in the later games. Like they kind of nail a lot in the first go. And it's interesting to see that they learned and they improved upon the games and not kept it the same.
Yeah, I mean, they set the ground level here and they've only improved it over and over again throughout each game to the point where like I would even go as far as to say Persona 5 is literally a perfect game. Like I have nothing bad to say about that game, period. So it was cool to see how it all started, but at the end of the day, it's just not that fun to play.
It's really not. The only last thing, because I know we're winding down, the last thing we never really talked on more was you have your 3 different modes. You have the outside world, the dungeon world, and the isometric world when you're inside of a building. Did you get confused by the movement controls when you're in the rooms?
Yeah, it's like the weird grid style movement.
Right. It's not like tank controls. You're just up is to the upper left of the screen, down is the lower right of the screen. So every time I got back into the game for the next day, it confused me all over again. So I had to like turn my controller sideways and hold it in the direction that he would be walking because I just could not get used to it.
I would routinely accidentally leave the room and have to go back in.
Me too.
But yeah, I mean, we're getting pretty much to the end of this. So the dungeon that I stopped on is the castle. And I just kind of want to go through each dungeon real quick. Share any thoughts that you have as we go through of the ones that we played.
Okay.
So there's the very first one, the hospital.
Yep.
Whatever kind of introduces you to the way it works.
I would consider that almost the tutorial. It's very simple. You're in and out.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about the police station as well. It's kind of just the same vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And then the factory and the Seebeck I keep wanting to say it different ways every time. That one is where the game is like, get good, loser.
Yep. It kind of holds your hand in the first two, and then this one just good luck, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I was texting you where I had to grind, where I was just like starting to really dislike the game for all the reasons we've already outlined. You said you were there for a very long time, right?
Yeah. I think all in all is about 5.5 to 6 hours, just because I lost all my progress the first time.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened to me. I just didn't lose that much.
Yeah.
Yeah, after that, you have the different universe school dungeon.
Yep.
Which was pretty much fine. I mean, it didn't really have anything notable.
No, the only thing that just made them more annoying is just those enemies.
Yeah.
I feel like the CBEC factories, when you get introduced to the ones that can one-tap you, and then it only gets worse after there with each one.
Absolutely. And then there's a subway dungeon, which in itself is not that bad, but you know, where you stopped when you beat that guy, there's a whole other second half of the dungeon on the other side.
And that's why I quit. I beat him, I went into the next one, took 2 steps, got into a random encounter. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore.
Well, what was really frustrating for me with that one was, so later on after this, you have to go back and forth between the sides, and you have to go through the dungeon again.
That's so bad.
But where my biggest frustration was, and where I almost stopped, was the dungeon after that, which is the whole reason I wanted to do this, because I wanted to talk about this.
Okay.
The Black Market Dungeon.
Which you even told me through text that it was very frustrating.
You get there, you know, it's the mall, and then the dungeon's underneath it. So first, you get to the Black Market, and once you're in there, you can't leave until you beat the dungeon.
Okay.
Like, you try and leave, and it turns you back around. And which is really not that big of a deal, just because everything you need is in there. You know, every shop, you have a clinic, save point, everything's in there, Velvet Room. So you do the dungeon, and it was probably the most annoying maze I've done yet, because it's like 6 floors, 5 or 6 floors, and you have to go through doors on different floors, and you fall down to the next floor. So you go in this door, you walk over this specific spot, and you fall down through the ground to another floor.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple places you can do that on every floor. So you have to figure out a path.
Oh, no.
This is where I read a walkthrough to get through the dungeon from start to finish.
So what happens if you go through a door, then fall down, and it's not the one you want to go to?
And you have to just go back up and try again.
No, boy.
Work your way back through it.
With all those.
But that's not even why it's frustrating.
Okay.
Like, that's fine. So you get all the way to the bottom. You get to the boss. She's like another student from your school or whatever. And she's like, get out of here. And she teleports you back to the top. And they're like, you have to go back and do it again.
No. You have to go all the way back to the bottom?
Yep. It takes you all the way to the top. You have to do it all again.
I feel like I would have quit at that point.
I looked at the walkthrough again because I didn't remember. It's just a fucking maze with random stuff, you know?
Wait, so did they, because this happens too, where the map will erase itself. Did that happen when you got teleported?
I don't think so, but it doesn't necessarily help me that much because I just don't remember. Like, I still was like exploring a little bit. So it wasn't like I only went to the places the walkthrough told me. You know what I mean?
True.
But yeah, so I get down there, I beat the boss, and then you beat it, and then you turn around and they're like, okay, now find your way out.
Oh no.
Go back through it again. That's when I stopped playing for a few days. It actually was not as bad as I thought it would be. I got out pretty quick.
Well, that's with the walkthrough. Imagine if you didn't have the walkthrough.
Well, I got out by myself without the walkthrough because the walkthrough didn't tell me how to get out.
Oh, okay.
So getting out was easy. It's just the other part, I just didn't have it in me to figure it out. And yeah, I mean, after that, I did a dungeon called the Lost Forest, which was also very annoying, but it was just a typical dungeon. And then where I stopped was the castle dungeon, where I just got absolutely destroyed and realized I had to grind. And that's when I stopped today.
Were you close to the ending or no?
Of the castle?
Or just in the game? Do you know how much more you had left to go?
I don't.
Because I'm very curious on this, because I think when we looked it up on howlongtobeat.com, it was about 30 hours or so.
Yeah, I believe that's what it said. So just purely looking at this long play on here, I am at the end of the first video, which is 11 hours.
Oh, wow.
So that long play ends at the boss where I stopped.
Oh, okay.
Like, I didn't get to the boss, but of the area that I stopped. And then there's another video that's the second half of the game, I guess, which is another 8 hours. So judging by how I was playing and the speed at which I was playing, I would guess that I was maybe like a little under halfway.
Okay, so that tracks for about how long it estimates the game is.
But then I would have had to grind and I would have had to figure out how to move forward. So like I expect that if I wanted to beat this game, probably take me 40 to 50 hours realistically.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, these games are notorious for being long, so I could only imagine that the first game was going to be just as bad.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I put like 80 hours into Persona 5, so it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, this is the deepest we've gone in any game ever.
It really is. And we're still not done. We still have to finish this up.
I thought I knew what my score was going to be, but I'm still questioning it. So let's get to some reviews and then we'll get to our scores.
Okay.
Very positive reviews overall. I mean, I pulled a negative one here, but overall it was sitting around the 7 range.
Oh, okay.
So the lowest review I could find was from All Game, and they gave it a 2 out of 5. And they said, Persona isn't worth the time or your hard-earned money to warrant a player purchase. It's a confusing and uninspiring game that leaves you frustrated and wanting to play something else.
It's very interesting. I wish they would have went into more of an explanation behind that. Like, I wonder what they're saying is confusing or uninspiring.
So with that specific quote, that was like the ending of the review. I couldn't find a link to the full review because it's not up anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I use Moby Games to find all these reviews, by the way. They have a nice little thing at the bottom of every game, and it shows you every review, and a lot of them are saved like on the Internet Archive and stuff, but not all of them are.
Yeah, I get that. It feels like a generic thing, and I wish I would know more context of what they found annoying.
Yeah, I mean, like, I could always pull from like IGN or GameSpot because their reviews are all still up, but it's just, I try to find different things because I don't want to be reading IGN every single fucking episode.
I get that. It's always IGN and then GameSpot said this.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've noticed I try to pull from different things if I can.
Mm-hmm. Which I will say, because this is like a more behind the scenes thing, when we go into this and then you say a name that we haven't done yet, and especially when it's like, oh, German magazine called Video Games, my thought is saying like, how am I going to find the logo to put up on the screen when you say this? And it's like a bunch of research to find it, and then I finally get to it.
Well, if it helps, go to Moby Games and you can find the exact review I pulled from.
I do, and then I try to look at what their magazine looks like and what the logo looks like. Then I try to find that logo somewhere else, and it's always fun.
Doesn't sound fun. Yeah. So the highest review I could find was from RPG Fan. And, you know, a little after the game came out in 1999, but I still wanted to count this because it's, you know, still a very long time ago. It's not like it's the PSP version. So they gave it a 91 out of 100. And they said, Persona is an achievement in dedicated game design. It has set standards that no one has yet to surpass, but is too often criticized for its minor weaknesses and lack of obvious eye candy. I guess we're just not ready for games like this that don't sugarcoat gameplay or focus on making pretty polygons or FMV.
Yeah, and I will agree with him on that this is pulling into stuff that we haven't seen before in terms of like game systems. At least we haven't for the show yet. I wonder what it looks like for other RPGs that we play.
Yeah, I'm interested to get into more different RPGs because there's so many different styles on the PS1. And each time we play an RPG, for a while anyway, I'm going to be trying to find those different ones. Like, I think I told you next I want to do an action RPG. There's also tactics. You know, there's so many different kinds. Like, this is essentially creating, at least trying to create a new style. And, you know, it doesn't always land, but it's trying.
Yeah. And I mean, I've said it a few times. They nailed so much of their stuff very early on. And the fact that we have these systems that we see from this first one all the way to the fifth one now, and maybe even the sixth one, like they found their style with so much stuff on this first game. So that's very hard to do.
No, I agree with you. And I'm just, you know, while you're talking, trying to think of what my score is going to be. And I don't know.
So going into the scores, I wanted to bring up this question because you made the reference at the top. How does this all compare to Saga? Because I know you said that the story is better than Saga. Clearly, that's a landslide. You can't do much worse than Saga. But in terms of combat, in terms of moving around the game, what are your thoughts on that?
It's tough for me, but I do think the combat here is better than Saga.
I agree.
I think almost everything is better than Saga here.
I think the exploring in Saga is a lot better. I like the fact of having to go to different worlds and do different things. Like you get to, every world is unique in how you go about and like what the world's for. With Persona, like you're just stuck in this small town, and at least in the later games, your different worlds are the dungeons. But in this game, your dungeons are incorporated with the current world.
Yes, but I don't really think this is a game that's necessarily focused on exploration, though.
I get that.
Saga is very much wanting you to explore this giant world, whereas this game is go to the places you have to go to. You can check out these other places, but you'll probably go there eventually anyway, you know?
I get that. I know in terms of like combat, Saga was faster a lot.
I don't know. The only thing that really sticks out in my mind, because it's been a while since we played that, and I remember just not caring about the story at all, and I remember just having to grind and grind and grind.
Yep. I mean, yeah, the story was terrible regardless. There was nothing to it at all.
And with this game, there's also clearly going to have to be grinding involved somewhere, but at the end of the day, I just think this game is better than Saga. You know, by how much? I don't know, but it's definitely better.
Yeah. I was on the same page. Like, I think Saga has a few things that I like a little bit more, but overall, gameplay wise, I think this is a little bit better than Saga. And I couldn't really put my finger on how much better than Saga is this.
I didn't feel that same anger when having to force myself to play this game that I did Saga. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still had to force myself to play this, but I didn't hate it as much as that. But what is, saying I didn't hate playing this game as much as that game? I didn't love this game.
I will say I love this game in the beginning. It's like, oh, we're back into the Persona. Like, I want to see how this series started. And just the more hours that passed, the less I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, we've been going on here for a very long time, so I think I am going to go with a 6.
Oh, okay.
I gave Saga a 5. I think this is a full point better than Saga, absolutely.
Interesting, because I was on the same thought. I was between a 5.5 and a 6.5. And I'll just go in the middle of what my range was, and I'll agree with you that it can be a 6.
Yeah, I was between a 5.5 and a 6.
Yeah, it's not bad, I guess. Like now playing it and getting this first experience, if I were to ever go back to this, which I won't, I know what I would do differently to maybe make the game a little bit easier on myself later on.
If I would ever go back to this, I would just play the PSP version.
That too, yeah. Just play a better version.
But yeah, so that puts us at a couple ties here.
It really does. So we're tied with Rayman 1, Bomberman World, and Destruction Derby. Honestly, I think this goes above everything.
I'm glad you said it. I completely agree.
Like all those other games are like, I don't know, they don't feel as complete as this does. This game has a lot of effort put behind it. I don't want like all of our negativity to come across as this is a bad game. Like this really sets the foundation for the rest of the series. And the amount of work and systems that are in play in this game are incredible.
No, I mean, I firmly feel like this is a very ambitious try at a new style of RPG that wouldn't be perfected for a few other entries in it. That's all. It's not terrible at all. It's just not a great game like the later ones are. It's like just a fine game.
Yep. It's just one of those things of they started somewhere and they polished it. And that's what we know and love is the polished version.
Well, that is going to do it for us. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you enjoyed this, please remember to like and subscribe as well as give us a rating on podcast services. We'll see you next week.